This is the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattles.
Boy, that was a fun off-air conversation. He's Greg. I am Nick. We are part of the CLNS Media Network. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. And holy crap, do we have a lot to get to, Greg. Eliot Wolf made the rounds on Tuesday. He spoke with Todd McShay. If you all have Netflix, Todd McShay, Steve Mensch, they met up with Eliot for an interview. I thought it was really good. Went about 30 minutes or so. You can check that out. Then he stood at the podium down at the Combine, met with the media. Then he met with the local media after standing at the podium at the Combine. So we have a lot to get to.
I think he also did Sirius XM and probably Patriots.com. Probably he normally does. So yeah, the full Eliot Wolf car wash.
Yeah, he definitely did Sirius XM. That's a great point. I did see the photo of him on Sirius XM. So he's all over the place. It's Eliot Wolf season at the Combine, at least for Tuesday. Wednesday will be Mike Vrabel season. But before we get to...
Bino must be so mad that it's Eliot Wolf season.
Yes. You know, some believe Eliot Wolf is as useless as bleep on a bull, but it is what it is. Before we get to Eliot Wolf and what he had to say and some of the other news at the Combine on Tuesday, there was a report from Jason Lock-Fora, and I did a podcast episode, part of it on the report. It's kind of weirdly written to me. If you actually read the report, you know, the headline made it sound like the Patriots were going to go down to Tampa and start banging on the door of Mike Evans. But then when you read it, Greg, it more read like Mike Evans is interested in the Patriots, and the Patriots might be receptive to that idea. I don't want to go, you know, down the journalism rabbit hole. I just want to ask you about Mike Evans. Generally speaking, Mike Evans hits free agency. Are you interested in Mike Evans if you are the Patriots?
No, because he's old, he's injured, he's expensive. I don't know how much longer he wants to play. Even though they won a Super Bowl with Tom Brady in sort of a Brady Patriots-like offense, from what I understand about the time, I don't think Tom Brady had a great experience playing with Mike Evans, and you know, maybe that transfers over to people that Brady knows that are with the Patriots now. But I'll just say in general about that report, and also I'm sure we might as well just get out of the way. So the same report also had that the Patriots were interested in Rasheed Walker, the Packers free agent left tackle, which Eliot Wolf said was not true today. And I'll just say in general about that report, the way, and I think I read the Walker part. I didn't really read the Evans part, but anyways, the way it read to me is that the representation for those two players looked at people who might be interested, especially when it comes to Walker, because I think it was the Packers and also maybe the Chiefs. Basically, their agents picked out teams that might have issues at left tackle, and they're trying to drum up a market for both players, which is what happens this time of year. So I didn't really take either report seriously.
I would be interested in Evans, but not as a plan A. Like if you go down the road of A.J. Brown, if you go, you know, I mean, if you're trying to look at Alec Pierce and you're looking at some of these options for X receivers and you just don't have the opportunity to bring in any of those guys, I think you could do worse than Mike Evans. Now, of course, it also depends on how much money he's going to ask for and want. As you said, Greg, Spytek does this market value thing. The market value for Mike Evans, I think Spytek had him at like 13, 14 million. If you could get Mike Evans on like a 1-year deal, 2-year deal, like average annual of like 15 million with a decent chunk, you know, guaranteed up front signing bonus, I'd probably take that swing. You know, I wouldn't mind that. I wouldn't hate it. Right. But again, he would not be my option A. He would not be at the top of my priority list. I would not be sitting there today if I were Mike Vrabel, Eliot Wolf, Ryan Cowden, Stretch, saying to myself, oh man, we have to do whatever it takes to get Mike Evans. I would not go that far, but I do think it's a worthwhile backup option. Now, I think he ends up probably staying in Tampa, and you might want to wait until like even after the draft to see who falls to you at 31. So I find it unlikely, but I do think it's a decent idea if there are other ideas that you can't execute. All right. Another report, and this one we absolutely take seriously because it's Mike Reese, one of the best in the business. Reese came out and said that Will Campbell is not going to require surgery. Apparently, he's only going to need to deal with some rehab. Obviously, good stuff. Surgery, no matter what, sets you back, especially, Greg, because the Patriots went to the Super Bowl. I mean, surgeries now, you get very tight against that window, right? So just your thoughts on the fact that no surgery, according to Mike Reese, and just a rehab deal.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good news. I mean, it sort of informs us that it was just the MCL, because the MCL by itself, you don't need surgery for. Actually, there isn't a surgery for it, or you don't usually do it. It's just rehab, rest, stuff like that.
Right.
The worry with Campbell is that maybe there was some damage to the cartilage or something like that. And then you're talking about, meniscus or, cartilage surgery for a 22-year-old. And then you're talking, all right, well now, how is that going to affect them long-term? So, it's, good news. And, I mean, I wouldn't say it's totally, unexpected, but I do think similar to Drake May, and even Eliot Wolf talked about Will Campbell and his injury situation, and I'm sure we'll get into that more. But you have Drake May and Will Campbell both not needing surgery. And so with that known, how much am I really putting on their injuries for their performance in the Super Bowl? For me personally, everybody knows my opinion on Drake May, but it also goes for Will Campbell. Not very much, even though Eliot Wolf does think that's a big reason for his postseason struggles.
All right, so let's get to the Wolf stuff. We'll start with the plan, kind of just the overarching idea of what this offseason is going to look like. Wolf was asked about a rebuild, and he said he doesn't look at it as a rebuilding. They're not rebuilding. He said, but they are still building. He also said that they're open to trading the 31st pick, but there was a caveat. He said they're open to dealing that pick if it helps them in the short term and long term. What were your thoughts overall on what Wolf had to say about the plan and how the team seems to be approaching this offseason?
Yeah, I think overall it's really in line with a lot of the things that you and I have been talking about for a couple weeks now, that this team was not going to fall in love or be with the Super Bowl run. They weren't going to be sort of faked out and think that they're ahead of schedule and they have everything solved and now they just need a couple of pieces to put them over the top. No, what I heard today was, whether it was the plan, the finances, how they're dealing with certain players that are under contract or not under contract. To me, it sounded like the Patriots still have their eyes on the prize, which is sticking to their plan that they enacted when they came in, regardless Super Bowl or no Super Bowl, that they realized that there's some depth that needs to be built up. There's some, starting positions that need to be addressed, but they are going to build this the right way, that they are going to go step by step and be mechanical about what they're going to do. And so, so to me, it was, I liked hearing that. I did, they are not going to fall into what the Commanders did a year ago. I think we can safely say that after listening to Eliot Wolf today. We'll hear from Mike Vrabel tomorrow, but Eliot Wolf is a straight shooter, and just like Mike Vrabel, and he's just not gonna, if there's something he doesn't want you to know or he's uncomfortable, he's just not going to answer it. And so that he answered the questions that way, it seems like everybody's in lockstep about what the plan is going forward. And I'm sure it's going to frustrate some fans who are like, oh, Super Bowl, like, we got to press forward when we got to get those two, Maxx Crosby and AJ Brown and this guy, and then now we're going to win the Super Bowl. I don't think that stuff is in the cards for these Patriots.
The Crosby stuff, the Brown stuff, I wouldn't be surprised if the Patriots made a move for one of those two guys. I would be stunned if they made a move for both. And frankly, I don't think they have the capital to make a move for both.
No.
But again, I would not be shocked because I do think they understand they have, a significant need at each of those positions, and those guys fill the need perfectly. It just really, to me, comes down to the whole window thing, right? Short and long term. How much do you think A.J. Brown has? I saw Phil Perry last night say that, he thought Brown looked a little slow this past year. Phil did say, he kind of left it open, saying, well, maybe if he's motivated, he plays for a different team, a different quarterback, maybe he'll have a little extra pep in his step. But if you look at the analytics, A.J. Brown was still a top 10 receiver in the league last year. And obviously Maxx Crosby is one of the best defensive ends, but they're both in their late 20s. Do you think they have 2 years left, 3 years left, or do you think they have 4 or 5 years left? I think that is also part of this math. I did want to ask you about Drake May's contract situation because it does sound like they're going to be patient here, but I don't know if they're just not going to spend. I think what Eliot Wolf is trying to tell us is that we're not going to go absolutely bananas. We're not going to bring in 5 big ticket items. We might swing at 1 or 2, and maybe one of them is an AJ Brown or Crosby. The other one is, we'll get to this later, a Christian Gonzalez extension, for example. I don't think he's saying we're going to tighten up the purse strings here, but it is an interesting kind of philosophy, Greg. You've got the quarterback on his rookie contract. I would think that would make you be a little bit more aggressive. It doesn't sound like they might get to that point, though. Are you okay with that approach, knowing that Drake May is going to end up making a ton of money in a couple of years?
Yeah, I'm fine with it. And actually, I don't know if it's completely opposite view or read on Wolf's comments than you did, but, I thought that, what I heard from Eliot Wolf was, and Phil Perry pressed him on this about the spending and sort of basically like what I wrote in my column last week about how the Patriots have spent a lot in cash the previous 2 years and whether that's going to be, reeled in year 3. And I thought he pretty much said yes. I mean, I heard a guy who, if the Patriots, in my opinion, after listening to Wolf today, if the Patriots are going to do anything big, and even like the Christian Gonzalez contract, he was asked about it, and I'm looking for the direct quote, but it was something along the lines of in time. Oh yeah, here it is. He said, Christian obviously was good before, made an even more significant jump this year. And he's someone we want to work with in the future, obviously, and we'll have those conversations at the appropriate time. So when is the time? I mean, he can get a contract this offseason, and if you think rewarding him like now, that might be the number one thing on your offseason checklist, because everything else sort of depends on how much money you're laying out to Christian Gonzalez. To me, it sounded like this is like down the line after free agency, after the draft, maybe into next year. Maybe we get into the 5th year contract, the 5th year contract extension. So, what, and the other thing that I took away from it was, if you're talking about big moves, and we're talking about big external moves, the way I heard it, at least the way I took it, was if you think that, say, let's just use A.J. Brown as an example, because I think it's a good example. Like A.J. Brown, his contract doesn't preclude the Patriots acquiring him. There's $29 million in guaranteed money the first year, next year of his deal. But his base salaries are also low. So if you're trading for A.J. Brown, you're basically giving him a new contract. I could see them doing that if there's cash going out the door, like Stefon Diggs, who Wolf was oddly mute about today. And so I had the exact opposite read. Like, I I didn't think that the Patriots were going to do much this offseason in terms of big move, maybe one move. That's sort of where I am. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be a very aggressive offseason.
Interesting. I don't know. It's you might be having some confirmation bias. But I might be having some confirmation. I might be having some confirmation bias. One of us might be having that. I read the Gonzalez stuff as, I'm not going to sit here and tell you we're signing him right now today because we want to work on a negotiation, and I'm not going to give up my hand or tip my hand. The conversations at the appropriate time. I just kind of take that as we've got other things that we've got to address here, which is probably free agency. I don't think, again, you can move money around. You can do a lot of different things. And if they know Gonzalez's contract is going to fall into a certain area, which they know, Devin Witherspoon, by the way, is also eligible for an extension in Seattle. That's the one guy you've got to look at and say, okay, do we have to necessarily beat, so to speak, Seattle to the contract with Gonzalez? If they get Witherspoon done before we do, will that cost us any extra money? We pretty much know. I mean, we pretty much know where the cornerback market is at. We pretty much know that Christian Gonzalez is a top 5 or 6 cornerback in the league. So, I mean, if you earmark that money and you say that's what it's going to be, roughly, I don't think you have to figure it out today, right now. That's my read on it, which is we know how much it's going to take. We know we want to keep him. As he mentioned, he was obviously good before, made an even more significant jump this year, quote unquote. To me, that was, yeah, we want him. He's part of our future, but we're going to handle some other stuff first. And it's probably because they know exactly what it's going to take, or roughly, to keep Gonzalez versus, well, to get to that number, we might have to move money around down the road, but we want to approach free agency, guys who are not locked up for the next couple of years, and see how much that's going to cost us. And then if we have to shift certain things around to make Christian happy, we'll make Christian happy. I don't think Gonzalez is in a big rush. I mean, if he gets a contract the day before camp, he's not going to really care. So I kind of read that as, we know what it's going to take, and we're going to take our time making sure we're addressing some other things.
Yeah, but Nick, here's the thing about that. Like, normally if this guy is a priority and you want to lock him in at early and get him cheaper, which the Patriots like to do, like the answer would be somewhere along the lines of having Christian here, for the future is a priority for us, and we will be meeting with his representatives here in Indianapolis to get that ball rolling. And we didn't hear anything close to that. I took it as, could they get because they're going to be extending him. So it's really like the new money's not going to come for a couple of years. So the cash for Christian Gonzalez is not that big a deal, this year. But, I just found it odd that, like, I figured that there would be a little bit more of a sense of urgency and that we want to tackle that. And it was really sort of like tabled. We'll deal with that later. Does it preclude them for dealing with that in like training camp? Absolutely not.
Yeah, I think this is when we get into the minutia, right? I mean, this podcast's on the verge of going 4 hours at this point, but I would just, I don't want to put too much more into it. I would just say, we're playing a lot with semantics here. And because Eliot Wolf didn't say exactly what somebody might want him to say regarding Christian Gonzalez, doesn't mean they don't like the player, love the player, have urgency on the player. Again, Eliot saying at the appropriate time could be next week. We don't know. He might be trying to play poker. All these guys down there, all these guys in Indy right now, they're all trying to play poker. They're all trying to play games. And so I try not to put too much into every single word that is uttered. By the way, a couple league updates as we're recording here. Adam Schefter is reporting that Trent Williams wants a new deal, and that the 49ers and Williams have struggled to find a contractual solution. And if the two sides can't bridge their differences, Williams would be expected to join this year's free agent class. So that would have a trickle-down effect on the offensive line market and how much money teams have to spend if Williams did actually end up leaving San Francisco. Also, a position of interest for the Patriots and Patriots fans is tight end. Story came out yesterday that the Falcons were interested in franchising Kyle Pitts. Well, according to Ian Rappaport, it is official. The Falcons have officially tagged Kyle Pitts. So you can pretty much cross him off the list. If you had visions of Kyle Pitts from Drake May doing special things, it ain't going to happen. All right, before we continue here, we got Stefon Diggs, Jaylinn Hawkins, offensive line, so much to get to. First, let's get Greg here to tell you about PrizePicks.
Shoot your shot on PrizePicks and get $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. That's right. PrizePicks is going to give you $50 in lineups when you sign up and play your first $5. PrizePicks makes every dunk, every dime, and every board that much more exciting. So don't miss this chance to get started on America's #1 app for sports picks. My favorite thing about PrizePicks is picking multiple sports in the same lineup. With basketball, full go. I can put Jaylen Brown and David Pastrnak in the same lineup and root for both. PrizePicks is simple. You just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. If you get your picks right, you could cash in, pick from all your favorite sports, anything from basketball, baseball, hockey, UFC, soccer, college basketball, tennis, golf, esports, and more. PrizePicks now has early payouts. If your lineup gets off to a hot start, you may now have the option to cash out those winnings before the game even finishes. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right.
Lightning round, Greg. I underscore lightning round here because we got to look at some of the stories outside of New England before we get back to the Wolf stuff. John Spytek, Tom Brady's BFF, now helping Tom run the program out there in Vegas. He seemed confident that they're going to keep Maxx Crosby. He talked about, he's an elite player and you're in the business of keeping elite players, yada, yada. Are you buying it?
I am, but Max is the type of player that does have some power in this scenario. So, I don't rule anything out. I just don't see, as far as the Patriots go, I don't see them giving the draft pick and contract compensation, but all that stuff is negotiable.
Yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. If Maxx Crosby walks into his office tomorrow, or if he pulls up his computer and has a conversation with Tom Brady via Zoom and says, I want out, I think he'll be out. The Eagles stuff was interesting because there are a couple of different comments here. I'm sure Philadelphia fans are clutching to the following comments. Nick Sirianni said, does he want to be here? Yes. Do I want him here? Yes. Howie Roseman also said, you do not improve by subtracting. But then, Patriots fans, other fans that might be interested in A.J. Brown might be paying attention to these other comments, which Nick Sirianni said that he can't guarantee that A.J. Brown is on the roster for 2026. And Roseman also, when asked about trades, said, we're always listening. What do you think's happening here?
I think he's available. I think I would be surprised if AJ Brown's on the Eagles, next year. I think that the Patriots would have some interest, but again, my belief is the only way an AJ Brown is coming in if Stefon Diggs is going and his money is going out, and that could very well possibly happen.
We'll get to Diggs in a little bit. I took it the same way. I mean, I look at what they said and, oh, yeah, you don't get better by subtracting. Well, you're not necessarily subtracting because you can always add at the position if you say goodbye to A.J. Brown. So that's a cute little way where you can, if you're Howie Roseman, you can certainly get back at that. And then Nick Sirianni could say, look, I also said I can't guarantee that he's on the roster. That was his little disclaimer. I think you're right, Greg. I think this is about price. I think that they have no problem taking that money in. I don't think the cap hit is as big of a deal. I know it's a lot of money. It's like $40 million pre-June 1st, and it's like $20 million or whatever after June 1st. Look, if the player's unhappy, if you can get something good for him, I think Philadelphia would be willing to suck it up and say we're just going to take the cap hit for the better asset and move on with our lives. And I think they're trying to leverage teams into giving more. Joe Bitonio hasn't decided on retirement. The Browns are open to re-signing him. Do you think he has a shot of becoming a Patriot?
I do. I think that he would. Of course, Mike Vrabel was there last year, the year before. so he knows Bitonio, and there'll be a relationship there, and I assume it's a good one because I don't know many people that Mike Vrabel doesn't have a good relationship except Amy Adams Strunk. But I think he would be, if they move Jared Wilson to center, which sounded like today that they're probably going to, or at least give that a strong look. And Will Campbell's going to be a left tackle, which he is. I think that Joel Bitonio would be the ideal veteran year or two stopgap at left guard to plug in there.
Miami listening on Devon Achane and Jaylinn Waddle. They won't give those guys away. Would you throw out an offer?
Not for Achane, certainly. Waddle I would check in with, doing my due diligence. I would be shocked if Miami parted with him, but I would check in.
Waddle's interesting because, this time of year, we're going to hear a lot about the size of a player, the size of a receiver. Not the biggest dude, 5'10", 185. Obviously, he had a couple of good seasons. You go back to 2021, over 100 catches. But since then, he's been okay. Not great. 75 catches, 72 catches, 58. And then last year, he had 64 catches. His last 1,000-yard receiving season was 2023. He's had some injury issues. Again, he's not the biggest guy. Certainly an interesting name, but I don't know if I'd go crazy to give up something for him. The Ravens, according to Eric DeCosta, they have made a setting the market type offer to their free agent center, Tyler Linderbaum. Do you think he hits free agency, or is he going to stay in Baltimore?
I do not. I think that, normally when the Ravens go to retain one of their guys, i.e. Ronnie Stanley last offseason, they get their guy. The only guys who leave Baltimore are guys that they're not really interested in anymore for one reason or the other. So I would be shocked if Linderbaum hit the market.
Aaron Glenn's going to call defensive plays for the Jets. Bedard, thumbs up, thumbs down.
Thumbs down. I mean, look, he's a good defensive coordinator, but this goes to, there were reports in New York all offseason about how Woody Johnson walked into his offense, and he was thinking about hiring, I forget who it was. There was somebody, there was some veteran defensive coordinator that he was going to hire. And then he went to Woody and said, I'd like to do this. And Woody's like, how much am I paying you? You call the plays. And then all of a sudden he had to backtrack and say, I'm not hiring. And then they brought in some other schlub on defense. And so the Jets are just they're a joke. They're a train wreck.
The schlub would be 36-year-old Brian Duker.
Yeah.
Who
maybe instead of schlub, I'll call him, use Duker.
Yeah, he was apparently Dolphins pass game coordinator and secondary coach last season. So he didn't have a lot to work.
That went
with.
well.
Well, he didn't have a lot to work with in Miami, so I don't know how much I'd put on Brian Duker. But yeah, my favorite part of the Glenn stuff was at the podium today. He said that calling plays is his superpower, which look, it might be, but great humility from Aaron Glenn. I'm going to go back to calling plays because really I feel like it's my superpower. Okay. Thanks, Superman. Good to know. I really enjoyed Aaron Glenn's superb celebration on the sidelines when he was high stepping and all that shit last year for one of their
that's his superpower. His dancing, his whatever he was doing. Yeah.
Last one here, the king of money in the NFL. This guy is the best when it comes to negotiating and getting the bag. Kirk Cousins getting released by Atlanta, which means he'll probably get another contract worth, I don't know, at least $20 million for this upcoming season guaranteed. Any idea where he fits, Greg?
Welcome back to the Minnesota Vikings.
Oh,
Kirk Cousins, to pair with JJ McCarthy.
Ooh, I don't mind that. I don't mind that at all. All right, we got to get to Eliot Wolf, more of what he said, including on Stefon Diggs, Jaylinn Hawkins' future. But first, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, like and leave a review. For those watching the show on CLNS, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the Patriots Press Pass YouTube channel. Of course, you can find our show there and a lot of other great Patriots content. And turn on the notifications, will you? We appreciate it. Check out BSJ, $50 for the year. Bedard, Giardi, tag teaming all the Patriots coverage with film and the best sources around. All right, Eliot Wolf was asked about Stefon Diggs, Greg. during his tour de force with the media. Here's what he said. Quote, this is on the legal situation first. We'll just kind of see what comes of it. We're monitoring those situations, not only with our legal and security department, but also with Steph's people as well. He was asked a follow-up. Is it important for Diggs to return given what he gave the team in 2025? Wolf said Steph had a tremendous season. Again, the leadership that he showed was great. And these are conversations that we'll continue to have and weigh everything and talk about different things as we move forward, unquote. Did not necessarily feel like the stamp of approval. How about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I thought that his remarks, compared to guys like you mentioned, like, Jaylinn Hawkins or Harold Landry or, any number of players about like, whether they wanted them back and stuff like that or, where things sit. I thought his remarks about Stefon Diggs were extremely tepid. And my interpretation of that, and I'm not saying it's right, was that, they have a contract issue with Stefon Diggs, right now, because his cap number is $26.5 million next year.
Yeah.
You can easily change that, convert it to, the base salary to, guaranteed money or signing bonus and prorate it and all this stuff. There's, something going on there. Maybe Diggs wants more guaranteed money. Basically, I read it as they're in I wouldn't say a contract impasse, but there's the team and Stefon Diggs are not yet on the same page about his contract. And that's going to inform the team whether they want him back next year. So Wolf's not exactly sure where they are at this point.
I want to compare this to the Gonzalez stuff because I think the conversation you and I had about Gonzalez was more about gradations of how badly the team wants to get it done or the level of urgency at this point they want to get it done versus the language of the Diggs stuff. And here's the clear difference. Again, Eliot Wolf on the Gonzalez talks, he's someone that we want to work with in the future. He's someone that we want to work with in the future. Stefon Diggs, these are conversations that we'll continue to have and weigh everything and talk about different things as we move forward. To me, that's a pretty clear difference of handling a guy that you want to be part of your future and that you're not quite sold on being part of the future. Speaking of the future, Jaylinn Hawkins is another one. Eliot Wolf was asked about Hawkins and in the safety position, and he said that Hawkins, he wasn't even prompted by anybody in the media. He was asked about the safety position, and then he brought up Jaylinn Hawkins saying, he's a free agent. And again, words matter. Don't want to read too much into it, but he did say he's certainly someone we'd welcome back. Again, a different tone than the Diggs stuff. Do you think Hawkins returns, Greg?
I would. Well, I think Wolf also said something like he earned the right to test the market. There's something along those lines. I'm not sure if I'm mixing it up with somebody else, but I'm pretty sure he said that about Hawkins. And the way I read it as they're going to allow Hawkins to go out and set his market, go get, maybe get a deal, or at least they'll keep talking, but they're not going to, bend over backwards for him right now. But yeah, I think, he had a good year. He's a good player. He's not old. I would say he's not in danger of descending or anything like that. And so, but I do think there are some very interesting safety options out there on the free agent market. So I think I think they also, and that informs some of the Hawkins contract stuff, which is like, all right, fine. You want to go out and see what you can get. You're entitled to do that. We think it's a pretty good safety market. You're probably not going to get that much. So let's keep talking.
I think some of the local thoughts about both Hawkins and Chase on as far as how much money they're going to get, I think some people are kind of overshooting here. You look at the edge market, you look at how deep, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, how deep the draft is at that position. And you look at the safety market. The safety market has been pretty much suppressed for the past couple of years. The guys that are really, truly at the tippity top get their money. Kyle Duggar was an overpay. I felt it. Greg felt it at the time that they overpaid to keep Duggar and keep him happy. That ended up being a big mistake, obviously. But overall, when you look across the league, it's not like teams are clamoring to spend a ton of money at the safety position. Now, if you have a freak, Kyle Hamilton, You're going to hear a lot about Caleb Downs during this draft process over the next couple of months. Dude's a stud. That's a different conversation. But guys who are solid safeties, it's not like they're going to sit there and make a gargantuan amount of money. All right, let's get to the
by the way, I did want to mention, because just remember that Kevin Byard, even though he's 33, was
I thought he was 63.
He played 99.8% of the snaps last year at 33, made $7.5 million. So just to give you an indication of the options that are out there.
Byard was actually really good last year. All jokes aside.
Yeah, he was.
All right, let's get to the offensive line. A lot of updates here. First, Morgan Moses, according to Eliot Wolf, expected to be back, Greg.
Yeah. I'm happy to hear that. I thought he played really well. I'm actually in the process of giving my player grades from this past season. I'm almost done. And, Moses, I put it into categories like all pro, Pro Bowl level, good starter, stuff like that. And, Morgan Moses graded out as the best offensive lineman on the team to me. I'm sure like PFF probably has Michael Wenu or whatever, which I don't have a huge argument with. But I thought Morgan Moses was awesome this year. I think he was battling some injuries. Actually, we know that. He barely practiced like the second half of the season. And his leadership is great, and having him there. And I'm definitely not banking on him playing another 21 games this year at his age, but it gives you at least time to get the next guy ready.
Yeah, I believe Pro Football Focus had Moses ranked as or graded out as like the 20th best tackle in football. I tweeted it out the other day. At Nick C Radio, if you want to give me a follow, at Nick C Radio. But they had him as a top 20 guy at the position. So, and not at right tackle, at tackle, period, end of sentence. They had him as a top 20 guy. I also know, when you look at ESPN's, pass block win rate and run block win rate, Moses was in the top 10 in run block win rate. So I do think, he had a good season, man. He's a great leader. All right, Will Campbell. Let's talk about the other tackle. Couple things here from Eliot Wolf. Wolf on the Todd McShay podcast said, we're not moving him to guard. So that has been a consistent stance. Vrabel said it right after the Super Bowl. Wolf continued that with his interviews on Tuesday. He said, Campbell's a young guy who had a tremendous season. 3 of his 4 worst games came in the postseason. And then when Eliot Wolf was at the podium speaking to the media, he talked about the injury. He also talked about the injury with McShay, but I thought he was better at the podium. He said, I personally did not see the same level of lower body strength that you saw before the injury. I think the film would attest to that. Your thoughts?
Couple thoughts. I would disagree with Eliot Wolf on that assessment and what the film showed. I think what the film showed, and if you watched any of the, whether it was Joe Thomas or, whoever talking about Will Campbell, what I saw was a player that had a bad technique in his lower body. Now, I'm not saying that didn't have anything to do with his knee, because I don't know how he's feeling, but what you saw was a guy who was not anchoring, especially with his injured right knee. I think that was the injury. Yeah, it was the right knee. And was that because he couldn't stick his foot in the ground because of his knee injury? I don't know. Wolf would know better than I do, because he gets the medical reports. But I will say his struggles to me were bad technique in the lower body, not because of injury, and because of increased competition. Because remember, for a lot of the season, the best pass rushers that they faced outside of Myles Garrett, who whipped with Will Campbell's butt like he got whipped in the Super Bowl because he's the greatest defensive player on the planet right now. A lot of those guys were on the other side with Morgan Moses, so he wasn't tested as much. So, I would disagree with that. I mean, as far as him at left tackle, we've talked about it. Both you and I think, are on the same page. Like, he's 22 years old. He just had his rookie season.
Yep.
He's gonna be. And I was listening to Felger and Maz earlier, and I know that's dangerous, but they were like parsing words, saying like, well, he said Mike Vrabel and Wolf both said like he's not going to guard or center. They didn't say anything about right tackle. Like, just give it up. He's going to be the Patriots offense starting opening day starter at left tackle. They're not going to bring anybody else in for competition at left tackle. It's just not happening, at least for like another year.
As far as Jared Wilson, much different tone from Wolf about the young left guard / center. Again, when he was asked about Campbell on the McShay podcast, he said, we're not moving him to guard. That's, that is as surefire committed to somebody. Now, again, if you want to play games and go right tackle, like Greg just said, you can play, but we're not moving him to guard. When Wolf was asked about Wilson and moving him to center, Wolf's answer I thought was pretty telling, Greg. Quote, there's openness to everything with him. He had never played guard before. He had good moments and bad moments, but he certainly has the physical ability to play there. And he's also got the intelligence and the vocal ability to play center. So I think those are conversations that we're still having, unquote.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. And I don't think anybody in his various outlets, who knows, maybe he said something to Sirius XM, I doubt it. Nobody asked Wolf about Bradbury and whether, they expect him back. And maybe that's a question for Vrabel tomorrow. It's anything's possible. With Wilson, I think remember, he didn't get a good chance at center in training camp. I think maybe he was there like one day, maybe.
Yeah.
Because Wes Schweitzer retired and they didn't really have any options at left guard, and Caden Wallace was a disaster. And so, I think I think he's going to get time at both spots, and then they'll sort of see where they are.
Finally, even though Wolf shot down the Rasheed Walker story, he did admit that the team needs offensive line depth at tackle. He said, Vidarian Lowe's a free agent. Thayer Munford's a free agent. And Morgan is 35 years old. And, he played awesome this year, but he's 35 years old. So tackle would be a need for our team. Greg, do you think this is a free agent thing they do? Do you think they could bring back? I mean, Vidarian's been pretty much a left tackle only. Do you think they entertain bringing back Thayer Munford? Do you think Marcus Bryant is there to, I know you said he's still raw and they want to work with him, but does he leapfrog Munford? Do they look in the draft? What do you think they do as far as the depth at tackle?
Where they are right now, and I can't tell you how Marcus Bryant is going to come back for OTAs and training camp. I mean, is he going to make the year 2 leap? That I can't tell you that. But as of right now, I would say in my mind, they bring back either Lowe or Munford. Probably Munford. I think he's going to be a little bit cheaper. I think, Lowe's going to get a decent offer because I thought he did a good job in his spot starts for Will Campbell this past year. And we know how desperate teams are for offensive tackle help. But I think offensive tackle in the draft, or at least a tackle guard, somebody with the ability to play right tackle, but also could play guard. I think it's a priority in this draft. It would not surprise me if they drafted one at 31 or second round, third round, something like that. Depends on what the value is on the board for them at the time when they pick. But we've talked about it. Like they have to get younger. I don't think they're looking for like Trent Brown or somebody like that, some veteran du jour to bring in. They already have Morgan Moses. So why continue to get older? Morgan Moses buys you time to find your future right tackle starter. And so I think they go that route.
By the way, just a quick update here. I saw Louis Riddick on ESPN NFL Live, and he was asked if A.J. Brown will be a Philadelphia Eagle next season, and Riddick said that he would not bet on it, or wouldn't bet. Yeah, that he wouldn't bet on it. I would just like to bring this up, and I just kind of tweeted it out while it was top of mind. Louis Riddick was in the Philadelphia Eagles front office in scouting department from 08 to 2013. That's 08, 09, 10, 11, 12, 6 solid years with Philly. Howie Roseman was also with Philly those years. And I would also point to, Howie Roseman pretty much worked hand in hand with Louis Riddick in the player personnel department. Louis Riddick was the assistant director of pro personnel or whatever it was in 08 or 09. And then he jumped to the director of player personnel or whatever it was from like 2010 to 2013. And Howie Roseman was vice president of player personnel and the general manager during that time. So to put it lightly, Louis Riddick very, very likely has a strong relationship with Howie Roseman. Does that mean Howie Roseman told him A.J. Brown's gone? No, but it does tell you that Louis Riddick probably knows Roseman speak. And if Louis Riddick says that he wouldn't bet on A.J. Brown being in Philly next year, I would not bet on A.J. Brown being in Philly next year. Christian Barmore. Interesting answer, Greg. Wolf mentioned, I want to get this exact here so people don't say, oh, you were adding too much to it. Here's what Eliot Wolf said about Christian Barmore. Christian has grown up quite a bit, and we continue to help him with that. He's continued to improve on the field. He had a little bit of a lull in the middle of the season there. He wasn't playing quite as well, but, kicked it up again at the end and continues to be a key cog in there for us. The Christian Barmore, Greg Bedard history is deep, my friends. It is deep. Bedard, once upon a time, reported that there were some red flags surrounding Barmore. And, caught a lot of shit from people for reporting that. But here's
how many off-field incidents has he had?
Here's your whatever the hell Wolf's title is. Here, very important guy in the front office. Here he is telling us that Christian has grown up quite a bit. They continue to help him with that. So let's just think about it first and foremost. If he's grown quite a bit and they still continue to work with him, that means he started where? That means they had a lot of work to do, and they still have work to do with Barmore. Very interesting answer, Greg, about Barmore. What do you think?
Yeah, the Christian has grown up quite a bit. Right now, for you guys listening at home on the podcast, this is me just staring. I'm like a staring meme. Like, Christian Barmore has grown up quite a bit. That must be a really low bar, I would say, for some of his off-field transgressions. People know how I feel about Christian. I think he's a really good player. I thought he was a really good player for this team last year. I think that's the pull, the push and pull for this organization right now is because he's really good. And I don't know. I took Wolf's comments as they ain't quitting him anytime soon. So come what may.
So we'll see what happens. Barmore's interesting because the off the field stuff, the legal situation, the money, the guaranteed chunk of money he's about to get. Interesting guy to see how that kind of unfolds. Just to wrap it up on defensive tackle, I thought it was interesting that Wolf mentioned that the interior rush, he talks to people throughout the NFL, and a lot of people feel like the interior is more important than the exterior rush. We've talked about that, I think, a number of times. I've talked about that a number of times. But I thought it was meaningful that in his answer, Wolf brought up Kyrie's Tonga and Corey Durden. Do you take that as a good sign for both of those guys, especially Tonga, who is a free agent?
Yeah, I think so. And if I were Wolf, I wouldn't be trying to pump up Kyrie's Tonga's market at all. But, it's funny because first he made the comments about Tonga and Durden. And I was like, oh, well, if you're not bringing back Christian Barmore, then those guys would be those would be his replacements. They'd basically be a platoon next to Milton Williams. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then he had his Christian Barmore comments, and I face palmed, and I was like, okay, well, we're back to square one. But I think, and I agree with him. I think both those guys are really good players. And Tonga, before his injury, that was a dude who not only defended, he was probably their best run defender, but he could also push the pocket. He pushed the pocket a lot more than I thought he was going to coming into this year. So, good player.
We still have more to get to. First, I'll just remind you, CLNS behind-the-scenes content. There are many Celtics podcasts, the NBA History Channel, and, of course, Bruins Ringside. And don't forget about PrizePicks. Download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Let's get to Edge. First, let's talk about Harold Landry. Eliot Wolf says that Landry is expected back along with Morgan Moses. Does that surprise you that Landry will be returning?
Nope. No, I thought that, I think his contract is pretty reasonable. He was playing at a high level before his injury. He seems like, remember Belichick used to have these guys that he couldn't quit at all. It seems like Harold Landry is one of those guys for Vrabel that he's like, I can't quit you. And he's just he might be here forever until the wheels completely fall off. But, because he does a really good job on the edge. He did a good job. I would say he was their best pass rusher until he got hurt in the Atlanta game, and he fell off a map after that. But, that was obviously injury related. So, no, I was not surprised by that. I do think there was some chatter about that, but, I think like we said when we discussed him, Chason probably is going out the door. And they didn't really have, without Harold Landry, they didn't really have anything. They have Jennings, they have Elijah Ponder, nice player. They'll probably add somebody likely in the draft. Maybe they add like a mid-level free agent on the edge. But if you don't have Harold Landry and Chason gets a big contract, what do you have on edge? Diddly poo.
Yeah, I think edge is a top need. I don't know if it's the top need, but it is. If it's not the top need, it's probably the second or third. And I had somebody on Twitter, shout out Twitter, by the way, crazy as ever in 2026, baby. But somebody, had said something along the lines of like, I don't think edge is a need. I'm like, you don't think edge is a need? Are you cool with Anthony Jennings and Harold Landry starting next year? You feeling good about that? With like Elijah Ponder backing him up? I think it's a need. And I also found it interesting, and I talked about this. I'm glad Eliot Wolf listens to Locked On Patriots, because I talked about this on Monday's episode. This draft actually lines up very nicely for the Patriots because it's really deep at defensive end. It's pretty damn deep at wide receiver, especially ex-wide receivers. And those are two big needs for the Patriots. And Wolf said as much today. He was asked about the draft, and, he talked about how things align nicely for them, that, that it is a pretty deep draft at defensive end. I would be shocked if they don't draft an edge. I would be borderline stunned if they don't use a pick in the top 3 rounds on an edge.
I agree.
I think it could be 31. So, I think it does align nicely. Just 3 more for you, Greg. Sounded open to the idea, Wolf did, about adding a linebacker this offseason. Where do you have linebacker as far as needs?
I would say, up there. I mean, I do think, and I agreed with what Wolf said today, I do think that like Christian Ellis took a big step forward this year. And I would say he's a bona fide starter in this league. I mean, I don't know if I would call him a good starter, but he's a starter. Spillane is good. I just don't think they have. I still, and Gibbons is a free agent, but again, a former Vrabel player. They might be able to get him back. But I think that, guys like Tavai and Mapu, they're not long for this place. So they need to start. That's one of those positions where you're looking a year or 2 down the road and saying we need to start now replenishing the depth there.
Yeah. And then that question, I'm sure you and I will get into this a little bit deeper as we get closer to the draft, and especially after free agency. And we know kind of how things fall together for this roster. But that's, a big conversation, I think, that kind of lies underneath this offseason is when you're sitting in the draft and you have 11 draft picks, how many of those picks are you actually going to utilize and take a player? How many are you going to use to move around? But secondly, how many of these picks and when do you use them on positions like right tackle? Like, do you draft a right tackle at 31 when Morgan Moses is coming back? And if you draft somebody at 31 at right tackle and they don't play right away, do you feel differently about that position? Do you draft a linebacker in the first 2 or 3 rounds? Are you more patient at that position because you think you can get through 2026? And one of the things that Eliot Wolf said to Todd McShay that I thought was interesting, Greg, was he was asked by Mensch if Eliot in the front office kind of looks forward to like the next year's draft when they're figuring out what are we going to do this draft, do you look at the future years? And Wolf said no, which kind of surprised me. He said when you talk about quarterback, yes, quarterback is a position where you say that class might be good in 2027, 2028. Other positions, we see it too often where you think guys are going to be really good. They end up not being good. So Wolf said that they don't really kind of forecast that out. So if you're thinking, well, they won't spend a pick on, even though if linebacker's deep this year in the draft or better this year than next year, and how does that play a role? According to Wolf, it doesn't play a role. They look at this year's draft. They look at their board. Wolf, by the way, said there are about 200 guys on their board, if you were wondering. And they look at their board, and that's a year-to-year process. So they're not projecting. Now, he said there are some players. He mentioned Jeremiah Smith, the Ohio State wide receiver by name. He said, Jeremiah Smith, everybody knows is going to be like a top 2 player in the draft. But they don't do that. So I thought it was interesting. Terrell Williams.
Yeah, just real quick on that.
Sure.
Number one, he didn't mention this, but to me, NIL has completely changed that landscape where you can't book on anybody being available. I mean, there are guys trying to go back for 6th and 7th years.
It's a good point.
For crying out loud.
It's a very good point.
So, all of a sudden these guys get $4 million to transfer someplace. And so, yeah, I think that's out the window now almost entirely. I was surprised he didn't mention it. But the other thing you mentioned about, immediate impact from the draft. I mean, I'd be shocked if they don't draft a linebacker at some point. Could be in the 5th round, 4th or 5th round. But, you just mentioned offensive tackle, and it just got me thinking that, I know it would probably disappoint a lot of fans if the Patriots say they draft, because apparently the tackles isn't very deep and it's kind of top heavy. And so if the Patriots can get one at the bottom of the 1st round and say they bypass edge in that round, I would be okay with that because, man, I mean, we've seen it here. I just don't think offensive linemen coming out of college are really any good, and they need a lot of work. And I would much rather, plus with injuries, I would prefer to get an offensive tackle even if they have Morgan Moses, maybe especially because they have Morgan Moses, because I don't think he's going to last a whole season again. Then I am getting that tackle now, and I don't care if he sits on the bench for a year. I don't care, because if he sits for a year, he's going to be ready to play in year 2.
And you're looking at 31, if you're just wondering. I mean, I just kind of started a lot of the draft research over the last week or 2 or so after the Super Bowl. Still catching up. I'm sure Greg's got a lot of catching up. We all got a lot of catching up to do because of the run. But, you're looking at Maxie Henachor. You're looking at Blake Miller. You're looking at some people are hoping and praying that Caden Proctor drops from Alabama. I don't think he's going to drop that far. Caleb Lomu is another tackle that a lot of people are talking about, somewhere in that, when you talk about mid to late 20s to low 30 range, those are the tackles you're looking at. And those guys are mostly right tackles. Caleb Lomu played left tackle in college. So it'll be interesting if they say we're going to take a tackle because we're just going to take a guy. We have to. We got to develop him. And we want him to be ready by 2027. And yes, it's our 1st round pick, and that guy might not chip in immediately for us week 1, but we don't care. We're doing it. Terrell Williams involved in the defense, with the defense this past season, Greg, according to Eliot Wolf today. I don't think that's a shocker, but it certainly makes me feel better about the continuity on the staff. And if Williams is able and capable and wants to add even more in 2026, it just feels like this staff is in a really good spot on that side of the football, on both sides, but that one as well.
Yeah, I was surprised that I think Wolf mentioned Terrell Williams a couple times.
He did,
both in regards to last season and also spinning it forwards in terms of, now Zach Kerr, he wasn't even prepared for the job when he got it last year, and look at the job that he did. Now he has the offseason. It basically sounded like, to me, Nick, and I don't know if this is how you took it, sounded basically like Williams and Core are maybe not officially, but they're basically like sort of co-defensive coordinators, or at least they're working together for the plans, and this is how we should spin this thing forward, even though Zach's going to call the plays on Sunday. So sounds like these guys last season and going forward have been working pretty much hip to hip.
All I'll say is they continue to get better throughout the season. They were mostly excellent in the postseason. So whatever you did this past year, keep doing it. I'm okay with however it falls together. If everybody is good and they feel comfortable, which it certainly seems, just keep doing what you did. All right, we're at an hour. We're gonna cut this off. We'll try to maybe get to spending on the next podcast. I think we're gonna do one on Wednesday, so that podcast will probably come out a little earlier than usual because Mike Vrabel is scheduled to speak with the media on Wednesday, and both Greg and I want to get that done and talked about before all the combine workouts starting on Thursday. So until then, we just gave you a lot. I thought this was a very good, informative podcast. Hopefully many of you enjoyed it. I think Greg and I do a pretty decent job of off-season talk. So I think we're off to a great start. Everybody be good with the snow. Hope you're all safe. You all have power, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.